Let's move on and talk about another story, which I really had my mouth open reading. Britain is set to hand India more foreign aid. It has emerged just days after the country launched a rocket into space. Yes, that's right. The FCDO, that's the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, sent New Delhi $33.4 million in overseas aid in 2022 and 2023. But the handouts are going to go up. That's right. They're going to go up by 70% to $57 million in 2024-25. And I'd like to know, what on earth are we doing? Well, joining me now is Eliot Keck, Head of Campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance. Good morning to you.
Morning, David.
Could you just talk me through this? Why on earth are we sending a nuclear superpower that launches rockets into space 57 million quid in foreign aid?
Well, I think there's a belief in Whitehall that India remains a country which needs taxpayers' money. And of course, India does have enormous challenges of development and poverty. But ultimately, we are talking about an emerging superpower. We're talking about a country that is rapidly becoming one of the most successful, dynamic countries in the world. And I think this is actually as insulting to Indians as it is to Brits. And in fact, the Indian finance minister in 2012 said that the country didn't need UK taxpayers' money. In fact, he described it as peanuts. So I think the UK needs to rapidly wrap up this aid funding.
Look, I absolutely understand. I've been to India. I've spent a lot of time in India, and it is a country wrapped with enormous poverty and great wealth. And that is the problem. You have all this massively sort of disparate situation. And actually, I think it's in India's gift to redistribute that wealth or to look after their own people. Now, also, when you look at this, they launched their third moon mission. This is the Chandrayaan-3 spacecraft. It will make New Delhi only the fourth country to do so, along with the US, the former Soviet Union, and China. Now, also, the UK and India is trying to strike a free trade agreement. Now, look, I think actually having a free trade agreement with India is a really important thing, and India is a huge economy, and so that's all good. But giving foreign aid just seems a complete waste of money. What we should be doing, possibly, is just strengthening those diplomatic ties.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think India is a vital country to have relations with. I think there are cultural ties that go very deep, and as you say, and it's an extraordinarily dynamic country, albeit one beset with problems. And I think, ultimately, the United Kingdom needs to actually look at this aid funding and think, is this really the best use of vital taxpayers' money? Most of this money, and I was looking this morning, goes towards projects to help infrastructure in some of India's poorest states. Listen, that's the role of the Indian government, and the Indian government is a functional, broadly democratic government that could be using its own wealth and its own taxpayers' money to support some of those projects.
Oh, can I just ask you, in terms of foreign aid, are we sending money to places like China as well?
I believe we did send money to China last year, but I think that is being wrapped up. I think there is a recognition that aid to China is inappropriate. We have been spending money on China in recent years. Whether or not that's happened in the last year, I don't have to hand. But, we're still giving money to countries like Pakistan. We at the Taxpayers Alliance found last year that £12 million was sent essentially to fund condoms and other birth control in Pakistan. And you really have to wonder whether or not we've got our priorities right. It's extraordinary.
I mean, we haven't got our priorities right if we're doing that. Just in terms of that. And if we, and you are right, we did give money to China, but China managed to spend £200 billion on arms last year. So it's hardly as though China needs the money either.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Listen, UK aid money should only be going to genuinely vital humanitarian projects, responding to genuine emergencies. That's where it's most effective. That's the sort of money that UK taxpayers will support. And, really interesting, I think one area that UK taxpayers may support is money going towards the Ukrainian military. But money to the Ukrainian military does not count as foreign aid. So when we're talking about that 0.5%, 0.7% GDP commitment to foreign aid, we cannot include funding to the Ukrainian military, which many would argue is as important as any other foreign cause at the moment.
So someone's just messaged me to say we send 800,000 to China in aid as well, according to a programme I saw last month. I've never known politicians so out of touch with the public in everything. This is Mick in Bradford. Thank you for that. Is this the problem, actually, that we are seeing increasingly, I suppose, an out-of-touch government that really doesn't have its finger on the pulse of the nation when our own people can't actually afford to eat, and we're sending all this money to other countries? It just seems and feels very wrong to me.
I think that's part of the explanation. I think part of the explanation is also they just don't have control of a huge bureaucracy. A lot of this aid funding goes towards these big multilateral organisations that then distribute the money themselves to different countries, where we basically have no idea what's going on. So that's why the Taxpayers Alliance, we're launching a campaign called Global Quangos Uncovered, where we're basically investigating these massive, large multinational organisations, United Nations, the WHO, these sorts of organisations, because we send tens of millions, hundreds of millions of pounds every year to these organisations that then distribute UK taxpayers' cash, and we have very, very little oversight or control over what goes on.
So why don't we have that transparency? I think it's a great campaign.
Well, we don't have that transparency because I'm not sure it's necessarily in ministers' interest to have that transparency, which is exactly why we've launched this project. Some of these projects may be, worthwhile, they may be value for money, but I think a lot of them won't be, and that's how you end up with £800,000 to China, for example, which I imagine would probably be through one of these multilateral organisations rather than a direct spending from UK development aid.
And just in terms of your campaign, are you hopeful that you will actually get this through, or at least there will be some signatories to it?
Well, the aim of the campaign at the moment is really just a transparency exercise. It's to show UK taxpayers, and we're publishing things every week, basically looking at some of the organisations, whether it's United Nations, IMF, WHO, International Organisation for Migration, just to actually basically take a peek under the car bonnet and see what's really, really going on. Because for years and years and years, we've sent billions basically unscrutinised, and it's vital that we properly account for exactly how every penny of UK taxpayers' money is being spent.
Eliot, thank you very much indeed for your time. That's Eliot Keck, Head of Campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance. I was absolutely staggered when I read that.
I know, but I mean, this has been going on for years, and it doesn't matter how much newspapers seem to raise it, nothing seems to change. I mean, apparently we're giving China money to help people learn how to grow rice. Well, if they don't know how to grow rice in China, I really don't know.
Well, also, how do we know what we're doing?
Yeah, and how do we know? It's just crazy, and I think it's because it's a bit like what's happened in the NHS, David. It's become such a large, rambling mess of administration that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And so, civil servants are able to give out this money like it's their own, but it isn't. It's ours. It needs to stop.
And that's a really good point, because it's so compartmentalised into government departments, and that really is the point about foreign aid. India doesn't need that kind of aid. What we do need, though, is a trading relationship with India. Of course, it's a huge economy.
But you know who does need that aid? The Yemen, the Sudan, where people are starving to death because of drought and war. So that's where humanitarian aid is needed, and I would have no problem with our money going to theirs. I do have a problem with it going to India.
Yeah, I do.
Pakistan for condoms. Come on.
I know. Rachel in Milton Keynes just says, David, we need to apply to other countries for them to send us aid. We are actually poorer and more broken than most of the countries we support. Who makes these decisions to send our money overseas? We're a laughingstock. I just think it's just a lack of transparency, and this is why it's so important that they're doing this campaign, and why I was keen to do it. This is another message just coming in. Good morning to you both. This is absolutely appalling, says Sarah in Hexham. Good morning to you. I am furious. How can this still be allowed to happen, and why isn't anyone doing something about this? Well, that's the part that we're playing here, and also highlighting it in the Taxpayers Alliance.
It just comes back to the blob, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This blob that spends our money willy-nilly, and then asks for more of it, that has no accountability to us, because they're not elected officials. This needs to stop.
It does, and other messages coming in. Whilst the government receives aids, it will not look after its own people, and that's what struck me in India, was that you've got great wealth and great poverty, and they are living side by side. So you've got the rich people in gated communities, and you've got people who literally, and I mean literally, have nothing in those shanty towns.
I mean, you say literally has nothing. David, I've travelled in India quite a lot as well. There are families with babies living on the pavement that you walk past, cooking their food, and you know what? They look up and they smile.
I know they do, I know. And this one goes on to say all governments have priorities, but all governments should be responsible for their own populations first. What rubs salt into our wounds is how much of our aid money is borrowed. Some of our major towns and cities look like third world countries.
Yeah, and they really do. I mean, actually, if you even think about our health service, David, we are delivering a third world country health service in some areas as well.
Yeah, and there's that old expression, isn't there? Charity begins at home.
Yeah, and I think that's it, actually. I'm glad you said that. That's what we need to start using as an approach to what we're doing. Charity should begin at home. So take that home as well, and let's start housing our veterans on the streets
100%.
before we house anyone else.
100%, 100%. I mean, and actually I was going to talk about this. You know, the migrant barges, and it was one of the things that I didn't have time to do with the head-to-head. But you know the BB Stockholm, which is this giant barge, and I was just wondering, I mean...
This giant barge that houses 500 people.
500 people. All. Yeah, it's 500 people, OK. So, obviously, in terms of that, they actually... And so the question I was going to ask the boys was, you know, is it acceptable that we're housing people on this barge? But the barge actually has TVs. Obviously, you are sharing a room. But there again, it is safe. You've got a wardrobe, a desk, a safe lock, a TV, large windows, ensuite bathroom, shower, gym, multi-faith prayer room, classroom, and so it goes on. They're also going to put on activities so that you can leave this and go off and do things. You can also leave. There is no curfew on that.
You see, I actually think that these should be locked communities until people's asylum.
So you would be
is processed.
harder.
I would be. I think, you know, we don't know who these people are. They haven't proven their right to be here. So until that's proven, it should be gated. They have everything on that they need. You know, if they went into an army barracks, they would have everything they need. They don't need to leave. People in the towns nearby are rightly worried about these people that they know nothing about, and everything is actually closing because the hotels are closed, the shops are closing because they haven't got tourism, and they're worried about these people coming into these small villages. Apparently there's one where, you know, we're going to put 200 young men and there's only 100 people who live in the village.
I mean, it's interesting when you think about it. If you are fleeing a war-torn country, for example, and you're claiming asylum, and you have somewhere safe with a TV and a shower and all the rest of it, and you can get on a bus, and I was just reading here that you get the buses which are available hourly between 9 and 11 to take asylum seekers to Portland or Weymouth. It's not a curfew. If they aren't back, there'll be a welfare call to check they're OK. I then goes on to say they can leave the port for 7 consecutive days and nights at a time, or 14 calendar days and nights within any 6 month period. If you're being given food, boarding, lodging, that's better than many people in this country have.
Of course it is, and sorry, they don't come back after 7 days. How do you find them? I mean, this is lunacy. This is basically the front door is open, come on in.
Do you think this is... Rishi Sunak will get tougher now? Because I think, just in terms of the upcoming election, will he now sort of strengthen the resolve on the migrant crisis? They have got this through. They've got the illegal migration bill through. They are making some headroom. Maybe this is the clear blue water they need, because I don't think Labour knows what it wants.
Well, I think when we come to see the election campaign, the Tories will see lots of, this is what Labour will do, this is what will happen to migration. That's how they'll play this. They need to convince people that they actually understand, and they're listening.